I'm Erica, travel occupational therapist, and today we're going to be talking about travel therapy, what it is, and how you can get started. Okay, so right now I am in Florida, which is my home base. I'm presently stationed in Medford, Oregon, and I came home for the wedding of two of my friends, Lauren and Christian, who actually graduated the OT program with me. So I flew in to see them. While I was here, I also got to talk with the students at Florida Gulf Coast University, which is where I graduated OT school, and they had such great questions that I wanted to do a video and sort of do a recap of that conversation and answer some of those questions again for anyone that didn't get to be part of that conversation. So first of all, let's do a little background. Travel therapy is considered occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech language pathology, and then OT assistants and PT assistants. We take 13-week assignments anywhere in the US, and we take those assignments to fill a need. That need could happen because they have too many patients to see and there's just not enough therapists living in that town to fulfill that need. It could be that someone got injured at work or left on maternity leave. Mostly I would say that the reasons that we are filling in and that people need travelers is because of staffing shortages, usually because it's a very populated area with an older population that needs a lot of therapy, or it could be because there's just not a lot of access to healthcare workers in that area. So we see a lot of travel assignments in really remote areas. And those are great ones to travel to because it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the facility. It just means that they don't have enough staff, and that's why we get to travel, to go and fill those needs. So more on that topic, the first question is, can I go anywhere? No, you can't. I actually, the funny thing about that is when I started travel therapy, I went into OT school knowing that I wanted to be a travel therapist. And when I started, I thought, this is going to be amazing. I can go anywhere I want to and have a job, and it's going to be so great. And it is so great, but I definitely cannot go anywhere I want to and have a job. I can go and have a job anywhere that there is a vacancy and that they are hiring, if I'm the one that they hire. So with that said, there's definitely certain locations and certain states that have most of the jobs. What we're seeing right now is there's a ton in California, Texas is big, Washington is big, there's some in Oregon, some in Colorado, some will pop up in Alaska because it's so remote. I have a Hawaii license, so things will pop up there, but it's not a very popular state. We also see jobs happening in Florida and in the Carolinas, but predominantly most of the travel therapy jobs are really along the west coast of the United States, with a few on like the southern east coast. An important difference there, if the reimbursement rate matters to you, you will make more on the West Coast than you will on the East Coast. And I think that that's by and large because, at least a large part of it, I think, is because there's so many therapy schools on the East Coast, especially in Florida. It's like there's a lot of jobs in Florida, but there's so many people to fill them that the rates aren't very high and that it's harder to get a position there. If there's a job available, if you talk to a recruiter, they're going to say that they staff in all 50 states. But what they mean is they theoretically could, not that there's jobs there. Another follow-up question to that is, could I be an international traveler? And yes, you can travel internationally, but you might be better off doing it as a leisure activity instead of trying to be a therapist and do that. It's not that it doesn't exist, it's just very few and far between. The two options that I've seen is if you become employed for the US military and take an assignment overseas, which isn't a travel assignment, it's a perm assignment, or it's an assignment for a period of years. So you could travel doing that, but it wouldn't be temporary assignments. The other thing I've seen is there's a company hiring in Australia, which is a really cool opportunity. And I definitely recommend doing it when you're younger. It's easier to get a work visa when you're under, I think 34 is the cutoff age for a certain temporary work visa. So that's another opportunity to travel while working, but they're not typical travel assignments like we think of that are 13 weeks long and then you get to bounce to the next one. You would be hired as like a more permanent basis. But they are out there. They're just few and far between. So I would recommend that if you want to travel internationally, that you work domestically and then just take trips in between. That's what a lot of us do. I've traveled to 20 countries since I started occupational therapy, and that's been really great. And then you don't have to worry about working while you're overseas because you can just hang out and enjoy what's around you. Another question is, how long does licensure take? And that really varies by the state. So, for example, Florida licensure took me 48 hours to get. And I have had 2 states that took me an entire year. So that said, it really varies. And if you go on any of the state websites, they're going to say, oh, 4 to 6 weeks or 4 to 8 weeks. But that means if they have all of your paperwork from all of your other states, and if they haven't lost any of it, and if you responded to their emails, if they had any follow-up questions, I would take that with a grain of salt, and I would really recommend that you don't apply anywhere that you don't already have a license unless you know that it's a really quick turnaround state. So I'm licensed in 7 states. Those states are Florida, Arizona, California, Alaska, Washington, Tennessee. But of those, Tennessee took an entire year. Florida, like I said, took 48 hours. Arizona was 3 months. California took me 2 months. Washington sent me my license and my 1-year renewal fee bill in the same envelope. So that was nice. So I think it's really important to get licensed before you start applying for jobs. Another good follow-up question to that is, where should I start? And I mean, you can start anywhere that you're interested in traveling. If you have just graduated, you might want to think about your need for a paycheck and how long you're willing to wait for a license. I was actually hired at Phoenix Children's Hospital right out of grad school on a travel assignment. And it took me so long to get my Arizona licensure that they eventually had to give the position away to someone else. It took 3 months I think, to get my Arizona licensure. So in hindsight, I wish I would have started with my Florida license, taken a job there, and then transferred over into other states. It's also a good idea to apply to all of the states that you think you're gonna work in at the same time, because if you don't, you're going to have to prove your good standing from each state to the subsequent state that you apply for, which is a lot of headache and paperwork, and that really can delay your licensure. So I recommend just picking however many states you think you may travel to within the next 2 years and just applying for them all at once. The next great question is, how do I find a job? And the answer is, you generally don't find your own jobs. You find an agent that works for an agency and they will find your jobs. This agent, also called a recruiter, is going to be your, hopefully, best friend on the road. They are going to hopefully have your back if anything goes wrong. They're going to be able to answer any questions that you have. I have had my same recruiter for 3 years. She calls and checks in on me every week. If I have any problems, I go straight to her. It's really important that you find a good recruiter, because that's going to be your lifeline while you're on the road. So that's really important. You also want to work for an agency that's reputable. Most agencies offer about the same reimbursement packages. You just want to stay away from agencies that have a bad reputation for screwing over travelers, because there are some out there. And there's agents too that are sort of unsavory people we're not big fans of. What I recommend doing, so what you'll see happen is that people, like some new grad will show up on Facebook and they'll say, hey, I need a recruiter, any recommendations? And you'll get 56 responses of just random names being thrown at you. And You don't know whether they're a good recruiter, whether they're a bad recruiter, whether the person that's recommending them has ever even worked for them, or they just want a $500 referral bonus. So I would be really careful with that. Like, it sort of has no meaning, it's just names. I would do your research. One way to do that, I have set up what's called the list, and it is a live interactive database of all of the jobs that are currently available through multiple agencies. And through that, you can, there's information on each agent and each agency. So you can look over all of that information and find out who even has the jobs that you're interested in. And then you can contact them and give them your contact information if you are interested, and not the other way around. I think that's a good way to go about that, which is why I started the list. The link to our Facebook group is below this post if you're interested. It can also just give you some good insight into like what the market's doing, where the jobs are, how much they're paying, how many jobs each agent has. So it's good to just look at to get some insight and, keep a good pulse on the market. The next question is, can I travel as a new grad? And my answer is yes, do it. Some people want to kill me for saying that because they think new grads need to get more experience under their belt. The honest answer is you have to decide how comfortable you are doing that. Do you feel like you have a network where you can reach out to someone and ask questions if you need to? Do you feel confident in your clinical skill set to be able to treat patients? And do you feel comfortable in the setting that you're going into? The setting is really going to make a big difference. My first job, I've never worked perm, I've only done travel contracts, and my first job was in home health, but I felt very confident in home health because I'm an introvert and because I like to connect with people one-on-one, and I felt very confident that I could show up to people's homes and help them with occupational therapy in their home environment. And I also knew that I had resources that I could call their nurse, I could call their physical therapist, I could call their doctor if I had any questions. And I was fine in that environment. So you have to think about how comfortable you are and make that judgment for yourself. Another follow-up question to that is, how much can new grads make in travel therapy? And the answer is the exact same amount that I make, or that someone who's been working in this field for 20 years can make. Hospitals have a bill rate that they pay out to the travel agencies. The agencies then take 22 to 30% of that bill rate to run all of their overhead, and then the remainder goes into your pay package, and it's the same for all of us. The only exception would be that if you're a new grad and you're applying to a position that's competitive, you might say to your recruiter, hey, can you submit me at a little bit lower bill rate so that I have a better chance getting that position? Or if you're someone that has a ton of experience in that field, then you could say, hey, I don't think anybody else is really going to apply to this. It's in a remote area. I have a ton of experience. Can you submit me at $100 more per week for this position? So those are the variances, but really by and large, we all make the same because we are going out to just fill that need, and we all have the same base certification. Okay, so the follow-up question to that is, what can I earn then if we're all earning the same amount? And that's a little bit different to answer than what you're probably used to hearing. Most jobs talk about their annual salary, and that's how much the company pays them before all of their taxes and expenses, insurance, everything is taken out. When we talk about reimbursement, we talk about it on a weekly basis because we don't know how many weeks in the year we're going to be working. And we talk about it in gross or usually net pay. So gross pay is the total amount of pay that the company sends to you. And net is the amount minus all of your taxes and fees that come out. So net pay that I typically see for travel therapists, speech, PT, OT, the lowest I ever really see is about $1,400, and the highest I would say is about $2,200. I have seen lower than that, and I have seen higher than that, but those would be sort of outlier contracts. On The East Coast is the lower ranges, and then the West Coast is definitely the higher ranges. I would say San Francisco Bay Area being the highest range. I took my first contract in Yuma, Arizona, and I made $17.50 cash take home at the end of each week. And my last position was in the Bay Area. I was in the East Bay Area of San Francisco, and I was bringing home $2,200 cash each week. Now, I have to say all of that with a disclaimer. PDPM hit on October 1st, which was a month ago, and PDGM is hitting January 1st. Since that time, in that last month, we've seen a drastic change in the amount of travel therapy jobs and also the reimbursement rate. So I'm telling you this, if you are a new grad thinking about getting into this, you're just going to have to keep a beat on the market to see what the market's doing, because right now we don't really know where it's going to end up. And I'll do another video to talk more on that, but I just want to give that disclaimer that those numbers are for the past 3 years, and we are seeing a change right now. So we just have to wait it out and sort of see what happens there. So take those numbers with a grain of salt, and we'll keep you posted on what we're seeing. You know, something else that's important to touch on is maintaining a home base, and that is a complex topic, and I can do a separate video on that. I did an interview with Travel Tax Joe, who does actually most of all of our taxes. He's very well versed in the subject, but there is a significant amount of detail to it, and it's very important. So what you have to know is that if you're going to be a traveler and you're going to be collecting tax-free stipends, you have to be duplicating expenses in your home base. So my home base is Cape Coral, Florida. I pay a mortgage here. I spend at least 30 days a year here. I come back, I take care of things in my community, I take care of the home, and that allows me to collect tax-free stipends because I have to duplicate my expenses while I'm on the road, because I have to pay rent elsewhere and buy groceries elsewhere and maintain a new place. So it's important to note that you will have to do that. I've seen a lot of people start traveling and not even think about that or take care of that, and that can really put you in an uncomfortable tax position. You could get audited for all of your tax-free stipends. So that's something to look into and make sure that you're setting up appropriately and that you're managing appropriately so that you don't get yourself into trouble later on. The next question that I got was, what do you do about a car while you're on assignment, especially if you're in Hawaii? Which is very specific and awesome, and I liked her thinking. I like that she's thinking she's going to Hawaii, and she should. She should get to Hawaii. I'm licensed in Hawaii and I haven't done it yet, but I want to, and she inspires me. The answer to that is, it's totally up to you. It really depends on where you're going. You sort of have to think on your feet as a traveler and just do whatever makes sense in that moment. So for me, what I wound up doing, and I have not heard of anyone else doing this, but it's working for me right now. I have a Jeep that I leave on the East Coast. It has gone between Florida and Tennessee. And I have a car that I bought to leave on the West Coast, because a lot of the jobs are on the West Coast, but my home base is on the East Coast in Florida. So what I do is I fly back and forth and I just go pick up the alternate car. That's what's worked for me for the past year. Prior to that, I was driving my Jeep back and forth across the country, which used a lot of gas, and it took up a lot of time, quite honestly. I mean, it took me 5 days to drive across the country, and in that 5 days I could have made $1,800 in a travel contract. So, you know, you have to think too, you know, time is money, and do I need to take a break and be traveling, or do I need to just get where I need to get to? Another thing people do is they rent cars wherever they're going. You can do long-term car rentals. You can also buy a cheaper used car, use it for the time you're there, and then sell it when you leave. I know other people, other traveler friends that I have that have just lived really close to the facility they're going to work at and either just walk or bike there. Sometimes the travel jobs will provide, the facilities will provide housing for you and it's within walking distance. So there's a lot of options. You just sort of have to be open to whatever they are. You can also have your car shipped. People do that quite often, but it's just something you have to think about in the moment and whatever makes sense for what assignment you're about to do. Okay, next question is, what do we do about health insurance? And that's pretty easy. Each agency that you work for will provide health insurance. You'll have to pay like $50 or $80 a week for it. But you will have health insurance offered to you. The downfall of that is that the deductibles are very high, and if you're changing agencies every contract, you're going to have to start over on a new deductible. So everything you've accrued will sort of be for nothing. I don't think it's the best solution to use their insurance, but that's what I've done so far. You can also get private insurance, so that's something to look into. I can post a few links below for private insurance agents. I'm not affiliated with any of them, but I'm looking into it myself right now. We are eligible for, forgive me for not knowing the right term for this, but Obamacare? I can't think of what else it's called. But we're generally eligible because, one, we take time between contracts, and two, we only make about $20 an hour in our contracts. So we are eligible for that. The problem is that if I live in Florida, but I'm never in Florida because I'm always working, a lot of times it's out of network if I'm out of Florida. So that is where I run into problems in the past doing that. So at this time, I think private insurance is probably the way to go, and I will update you as I find better solutions for that. Another question that I got is, what has been hardest for you while being on the road? And it's sort of similar to the answer to the last question. It's that it's really hard to take care of yourself while you're on the road, in terms of finding a doctor, finding a dentist, finding a person to do your hair. Those three things are the most challenging, I would say, because it generally takes about 3 months to get into a doctor or dentist. And by the time you get somewhere, find a doctor or dentist because you need one, and then get your appointment, you would already be gone. So it's sort of, and you also don't have that follow-up with your x-rays and, you know, the information that your doctor has about you. So it's sort of hard to manage your self-care. A solution to that is to keep all of those things in your home base and then just fly back to your home base to manage those. Or, you know, you can travel within driving distance to your home base. It never occurs to me because I haven't done that, but a lot of people do. You know, if you work within like 3-5 hour range of your home base, you could do weekend trips and come back and get those things done. So those are just things to think about. I would say those are the biggest challenges. The other biggest challenge I would say is like loneliness and isolation on the road. You can go with a friend or take a pet, and that'll sort of damper that. But I would say there's like a period of time, like a month, 6 weeks in, where I feel really lonely and isolated, but then that kind of goes away. So I see the same cycle happening all the time. So I would say those are the two biggest challenges. And then follow up to that, what are the best things about being a travel therapist? I get to go all over the country. I get to see new places. I get to feel new places. I get to be part of different communities for a while. Everywhere I go, I make a bucket list of things that I want to do in that place. And it's all like the weird things that you can only do there and nowhere else. And I have so much fun doing that. Like this week, like on my list for this week was to come and walk all of the boardwalks in this area in Florida. And so that's what I'm doing right now. You can see you're on a board. Oh, that's not very good. You can see you're on a boardwalk with me. And it's just nice. And so I think that's the best thing for me. And also connecting with other travelers. Like it's cool. Like we live a different lifestyle, but then you start making friends that also live that lifestyle. So you have someone to sort of relate to in our weird little life. Anyway, I hope that that answered some questions for you guys. If you have any more questions, feel free to comment below. I'll respond. You can also message me personally. I'm more than happy to help anyone that needs a mentor or just has some questions. So definitely feel free to reach out to me. If you want to stay more in the know about what's going on in the industry, check out my Facebook group. I'll put the link below. It's called The List. It has, like I said, all of the updated jobs from multiple agencies, and you can also get information about the agents and agencies so you sort of know what you're getting into. I will see you guys next time.